What if I told you, the moment you start becoming who you really are is the moment the world quietly begins to push you away? Not with open hands, not with loud protests, but with silence, with distance, with looks that say, "You've changed," as if that were a sin. Have you felt it? That strange tension in the air when you speak with more clarity than you used to, when you no longer laugh at the same tired jokes, when your words start to carry weight instead of noise. Subtle at first. People shift in their chairs when you speak. They change the subject when your thoughts go deeper than comfort allows. They say you're intense, dramatic, overthinking, but deep down they know, and so do you, that something inside you has shifted. And here's the truth no one tells you. The moment you begin to awaken, you become a threat. Not because you're dangerous, but because your clarity holds up a mirror. And most people spend their entire lives running from their reflection. You don't even have to speak. Your presence alone begins to unsettle. Because in a world addicted to distraction, silence is confrontation. Because when you stop living on autopilot, others have to question their own routines. Because when your mind breaks free, there's feel more like cages. And maybe that's where you are right now. Somewhere between who you were and who you're becoming. A space that feels isolating, unstable, like you're floating in a life that no longer fits, but not yet standing in one that feels like yours. But that space, that disoriented, lonely, quiet space, that is the birthplace of power. And now the question becomes, can you stand firm when the world no longer recognizes you? Because the moment you start to awaken is the moment the war begins. Not a war outside, a war within, between your old self begging to stay and the new self demanding to rise. And that is where we begin. And as that quiet war unfolds inside you, something else begins to happen. People start to notice. They won't say it directly. Most won't even realize what's happening, but you'll feel it. The energy in the room shifts when you speak. Your presence begins to feel heavier, not because you're loud, but because you're no longer carrying the need to be approved. You've stopped making yourself small. And the moment you do, others start shrinking in your shadow. And they hate that. You haven't attacked anyone. You haven't judged anyone. You simply started choosing your thoughts over their expectations. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Your growth will offend people who have chosen comfort over evolution. And when your actions highlight their inaction, when your clarity makes their confusion visible, they will try to make you the problem. They'll call you distant, cold, unrelatable, too serious, too intense, too much. Because to admit that you're becoming more would be to admit that they've stopped growing. So they label you instead. It's easier. It's easier to say you've changed than to ask why they haven't. And if you're not careful, you'll start to wonder if maybe they're right. You'll feel guilt for evolving. You'll feel tempted to dilute yourself just to keep the peace, to shrink your thoughts so they'll fit into the silence, to laugh when something isn't funny, to nod when you disagree, to hide when you should speak. But don't, because that's how the old version of you survives. It clings through compromise. It feeds on your fear of being alone. But you are not here to remain palatable to people who fear their own potential. You are not here to make others comfortable. You are here to become fully, dangerously, unapologetically you. And yes, there is a cost. Because when you start choosing growth over comfort, solitude over conformity, clarity over agreement, you will disturb people who've never questioned their own script. But the most important thing to remember is this. Their discomfort is not your burden. Let them squirm. Let them misinterpret. Let them whisper. Because that noise is proof of your volume. That resistance is proof of your movement. And that unease you're causing, that's the sound of illusions breaking. The question is, can you keep going even when the crowd walks away? Because the path you're on isn't paved with approval. It's built with pain. And pain is not a detour. It's the gate. You don't grow because things are easy. You grow because they're not. So when life starts shaking, breaking, unraveling, don't run. Don't beg the storm to pass. Ask yourself instead, what is this trying to build inside me? Because real strength never comes from what feels good. It comes from what nearly destroys you and doesn't. And that is where your mind begins to change. Not with affirmations, not with fake smiles or shallow wins, but with chaos. Because chaos, despite everything we've been told, is not your enemy. It's the birthplace of everything powerful inside you. You see, most people pray for peace. They chase stability. They believe that calm waters mean they're doing something right. But what if that calm is just stagnation dressed up as safety? What if the shaking, the confusion, the breaking is the very thing molding you into something you've never been before? No one likes to admit it, but your most profound transformations didn't come when life was easy. They came in the middle of the storm. They came when you were lost, uncertain, broken, when you had nothing left to hold on to but your own breath. And still, you made it through. That's not coincidence. That's not weakness turning into strength. That's strength revealing itself. You were never fragile, the comfort just kept you asleep. Real evolution doesn't come from retreats and relaxation. It comes from rebuilding yourself when no one is watching, from standing back up when you're exhausted, from choosing discipline when your soul is screaming for distraction. It comes from suffering, not because suffering is noble, but because it burns away everything that's fake. When the pain gets loud enough, the truth shows up. And it's not poetic. It's brutal. It's messy. But it's also liberating. Because once you stop running from chaos, you start walking through it like it's your training ground. Because it is. And something wild happens when you do. What used to break you becomes what builds you. What used to paralyze you becomes what prepares you. But you have to stop asking for the world to be softer. You have to start asking yourself to be stronger. That shift changes everything. Because suddenly, pain becomes feedback. Failure becomes fuel. Loneliness becomes silence. And silence becomes clarity. This is where the old illusions fall away. You stop waiting for someone to save you. You stop believing that ease is the goal. And you begin to take full responsibility not just for what happens to you, but for who you become because of it. It's no longer about what life does. It's about how you respond, how you rise, how you reshape. And that reshaping begins with a single, terrifying realization. There's no one coming, no one to rescue you, no higher power writing the script for you, no invisible hand guiding the chaos with a prepackaged meaning. Just you, standing at the edge of everything you thought you knew, with only one task left. Create. Not wish, not wait, not wonder. Create. Because once you understand that no one is writing your story but you, the fear doesn't go away, but it transforms. It becomes fuel. It becomes urgency. Because this life, this strange, unpredictable, often painful life, is yours to shape or surrender to. And that's where it gets hard, because shaping it means taking responsibility for everything. Not just the victories, the failures too, the choices you made out of fear, the things you allowed, the times you stayed small because it was easier than being misunderstood. No more hiding. There is no blueprint, no commandment etched in stone, no sky handing you permission. There's just you and the raw, terrifying freedom to define what your life will mean. And yes, that freedom is heavy. It will weigh on your shoulders in the quiet hours of the night. It will ask you to look at your patterns, your excuses, your masks. It will strip away everything you leaned on to avoid becoming yourself. But here's the paradox. That same freedom, the one that feels unbearable at first, is the very thing that makes you unstoppable. Because the moment you stop outsourcing meaning, you start generating it. You stop asking, "What should I do?" And you start asking, "What is worthy of who I want to become?" You stop begging for signs. You start creating direction. You stop obeying. You begin becoming. And something profound happens when you do. You start to feel it. This rising within you. Not ego, not arrogance, but a grounded power, a quiet certainty. You're not here to follow. You're not here to conform. You're not here to shrink to fit someone else's story. You're here to write your own, to speak your truth, to live like someone who knows they were not born to be tamed. And yes, that will make others uncomfortable. It's supposed to, Because when you stop being defined by rules you didn't write, you become something rare, something dangerous. Not dangerous in violence, dangerous in presence. Presence that says, I will not betray myself to belong. I will not silence my soul to keep your peace. I will not disappear just because I make you see yourself. That kind of presence can't be broken. And once it awakens in you, everything changes. Everything changes. Because now you're no longer trying to fit in, you're trying to expand. You're no longer bending to meet the world's expectations. You're challenging the world to rise to yours. You stop asking for validation because you've found something deeper, alignment. You start walking differently, not with arrogance, but with certainty. Not above others, but beyond the need to be accepted by them. And people feel it. They sense that something in you is no longer up for negotiation. You won't play the game. You won't fake the smile. You won't pretend to be less so they can feel more. That is the birth of your inner authority. You begin creating your own laws. Not legal laws, soul laws. The code by which your spirit operates. And even if the entire world stands against it, you don't flinch. Because when you've chosen your path from the deepest part of yourself, no rejection can shake you. No insult can redefine you. No silence can erase you. This isn't confidence. It's sovereignty. You are no longer asking life to accept you. You're telling life who you are. And yet, that doesn't mean it gets easier. Because the further you go down this path, the more you'll be misunderstood. The more you'll walk alone. Not because you've closed yourself off, but because fewer and fewer people are willing to meet you where you are. You stop finding comfort in the crowd, and the crowd starts finding discomfort in you. They'll call you difficult, intense, too focused. But what they really mean is, you make me question the life I've settled for. And in that space between your truth and their resistance, you will be tested. Tested to shrink, to explain, to apologize for growing. But you don't owe them that. Because the cost of being fully yourself is the loss of those who only loved your mask. And when you let go of those people, those spaces, those roles that required you to betray yourself, you don't become empty. You become clear. Clear about who you are. Clear about what matters. Clear about the kind of life that's worth building, even if you have to build it with your bare hands in silence with no one watching. And that silence, that's where the real transformation begins. That silence, that's where the noise of the world fades. And your true voice begins to speak. Not the voice shaped by opinions. Not the voice trained to perform. But the voice that was buried beneath all the pretending. And when it rises, quiet, steady, undeniable, you realize something. You've never really been alone. You were just surrounded by noise that drowned out your soul. In solitude, you begin to see, not just the world, but yourself. What you've tolerated. What you've feared, what you've abandoned within to be accepted without. And suddenly, you're face to face with the raw, unfiltered version of you. The one that never needed applause. The one that doesn't beg for company. The one that only wants truth, no matter how much it costs. This solitude is not a punishment. It's a forge. A sacred place where the weak self dies and the real self begins to breathe. Where stillness replaces stimulation. Where clarity sharpens like a blade, and the deeper into the silence you go, the more distant the world becomes. Not because you've grown cold, but because you've grown clear. And in that clarity, you see things others don't. You see how most people are sleepwalking, trapped in routines they didn't choose, speaking beliefs they never questioned. You see how mediocrity isn't accidental. It's protected, enforced, celebrated, not by tyrants, but by the collective, the soft, suffocating pressure to be agreeable, to follow the script, to never shine too brightly, to never question too loudly, to never, ever be too much. But you've already stepped outside of that. And now you begin to feel it, the resistance not from systems above, but from the crowd beside you, not from cruelty, but from conformity, not from villains, but from the ordinary. And in that moment, you realize the greatest threat to your power isn't fear. It's belonging. Because to truly belong to yourself, You must risk not belonging anywhere else. You must accept being the outlier, the one who doesn't laugh when others do, the one who says no when silence is safer, the one who dares to be misunderstood. And they will misunderstand you, not because you're unclear, but because your clarity reveals their denial. And that is where the real battle begins. Because the moment you refuse to conform, the world begins its quiet attack. Not with weapons, but with whispers, with disapproval, with looks that say, "Who do you think you are?" They won't challenge you openly. They'll undermine you in subtler ways, with sarcasm, with distance, with 1,000 tiny reminders that your strength makes them uncomfortable. You'll feel it in rooms where you no longer fit, in conversations that once felt safe but now feel hollow. You'll notice how often people prefer polite lies over difficult truths, and you'll be tempted, so tempted, to dim yourself again, to laugh when you want a challenge, to agree when your soul says no, to become invisible just to be included. But don't. Because every time you betray yourself to fit in, you teach the world how to treat you. You teach your spirit to stay silent. You build a life that looks good on the outside and feels like a prison on the inside. And no applause, no acceptance, no amount of fitting in is worth that. The truth is, mediocrity has a system. It survives through unspoken rules, rules that punish difference and reward obedience. Be likable. Be nice. Don't question too much. Don't dream too loud. But the moment you step outside of that game, you begin to see it for what it is, a cage lined with comfort. And comfort is the enemy of greatness, because comfort asks nothing of you. It doesn't demand growth. It doesn't require courage. It only asks that you stay the same. But you didn't come this far to stay the same. And yes, it's hard. Being the one who says no when everyone says yes. Being the one who walks away when everyone else stays. Being the one who dares to believe they were meant for more than quiet desperation. That kind of strength makes people nervous. It disrupts the rhythm of resignation they've grown used to. They'll call it selfishness. They'll call it arrogance. They'll try to drag you back into the narrative they're still trapped in. But don't let them, because the truth is, most people don't actually want to grow. They want the illusion of growth, as long as it doesn't cost them comfort. And your presence, your refusal to shrink, reminds them of the price they were never willing to pay. You don't owe them your silence. You don't owe them your conformity. You don't owe anyone the watered-down version of yourself just so they can feel at ease. Because while they protect their comfort, you're building your character. While they chase acceptance, you're building something far more rare, integrity. And that comes with a price. And that comes with a price. Because building integrity isn't glamorous. It's not loud. It doesn't come with recognition or rewards. It comes with loss. You will lose people, not because you stopped loving them, but because they only loved the version of you that played small. You will lose opportunities because some doors only open if you agree to leave part of yourself outside. You will lose comfort because growth makes comfort impossible. But what you gain something no one can give you and no one can take away. You gain a quiet, unwavering sense of self. A center that doesn't shake when others doubt you. A foundation that holds, whether you're applauded or abandoned. You gain peace, not the kind that comes from everything going your way, but the kind that comes from knowing you won't betray yourself no matter what happens. That peace is earned. Earned in the late nights where no one sees you. Earned in the moments you choose principle over popularity. Earned every time you tell the truth, even when your voice trembles. Because you're not just building a mind, you're building a spine. And as it grows stronger, something shifts in how the world responds to you. You become undeniable. Not because of how loud you are, but because of how still you've become inside. Because nothing shakes a person who has already faced their own darkness and decided to rise anyway. You begin to carry weight, not the kind that burdens you, but the kind that grounds you. People feel it. In your silence, in your gaze, in the way you don't flinch when others project their insecurities onto you. You become the mirror. And not everyone can handle their reflection, so they'll try to blur you, dismiss you, Dismiss your power as luck or ego or delusion. Let them. Their rejection is not your reflection. It's their resistance to their own unlived potential. Because the truth is, when you stop being controlled, you become a threat to every system that survives on control. You stop being predictable. You stop being manageable. You stop being useful in the way they want you to be. And that, more than anything else, is what makes you powerful. You no longer move from fear. You move from knowing. A knowing that isn't loud. It doesn't need to be, because it isn't built on theory or secondhand beliefs. It's built on fire. Fire you walk through, alone. And when you've walked through fire and made it out with your soul intact, you don't need to convince anyone of who you are. You just are. You become solid, still, unshakable. Not because nothing affects you, but because nothing owns you. And that's the shift. You no longer chase validation. You no longer fear rejection. You no longer confuse belonging with becoming. Because you've discovered something deeper, something sacred. You belong to yourself now, fully, finally. And when you reach that point, when you truly possess yourself, you'll feel a strange kind of peace. Not happiness, peace. The kind that whispers, let them misunderstand you. Let them leave. Let them laugh. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to become someone you yourself can understand. Someone you can trust. Someone you can wake up with and say, yes, this is who I am. But that kind of self-possession doesn't come cheap. It demands everything false in you be burned away. It demands solitude. It demands grief. It demands the death of who you thought you had to be. And once you've buried those pieces, what rises in their place is something rare. Presence. A kind of presence that doesn't need to be explained. A kind that walks into a room and says nothing, but still shifts the atmosphere. Not because of image, not because of ego, but because of essence. Because when you've suffered without becoming bitter, when you've been broken without staying broken, when you've faced yourself without turning away, you begin to carry a power that the world cannot touch. And that power terrifies those who've never dared to go that deep. So they will attack it, not with force but with subtlety. They'll try to frame your strength as coldness, your clarity as arrogance, your independence as pride. But you will know the truth. You are simply not domesticated. And in a world that teaches people to be tame, to seek permission, to serve their image over their integrity, being undomesticated is the most radical thing you can be. Being undomesticated is the most radical thing you can be. Because when you no longer need to be led, you no longer need to follow. And when you stop chasing acceptance, you stop fearing rejection. You begin to walk in a way that says, I am not here to please you. I am here to live fully. And that kind of living, it disturbs the fabric of everything fake. People won't know what to do with you. You won't play by the rules. You won't beg for inclusion. You won't participate in the theater of pretend. You'll simply show up as you are, unapologetic, unfiltered, unwavering. And that kind of presence doesn't fit into the world's carefully managed scripts. It threatens them because it says, you can be more. You don't have to hide. You don't have to trade your soul for approval. And not everyone wants to hear that. Some people don't want to be free. They want to be comfortable. And your freedom reminds them of their chains. So they will resent you. They will distance themselves. They will try to shrink you, not because they're evil, but because they're afraid. Afraid of what it would cost to truly wake up. Afraid of who they would lose. Afraid of what they'd have to face inside themselves. And you'll have to keep walking anyway. You'll have to carry the weight of your own truth through rooms that weren't built to hold it. You'll have to hold your ground when everyone else runs back to safety. You'll have to become your own source of warmth in the cold hours when solitude presses heavy on your chest. But in that silence, something remarkable happens. You stop needing the world to reflect your worth. You start seeing it clearly on your own. You no longer ask, am I enough for them? You ask, are they aligned with what I now know I am? And when you start living from that place, when you stop bending and start building, the world can't help but take notice. Even those who once feared your strength will start to feel drawn to it, because deep down, everyone is craving the same thing: permission to be real, to feel, to be whole. And by being fully yourself, you quietly give others the courage to begin their own becoming. But don't misunderstand this. Your strength is not for their comfort. It's for your freedom. And the cost of that freedom is this: you will be seen, and not everyone will like what they see. Because when you become impossible to ignore, you also become impossible to control. And in a world that thrives on control through fear, through guilt, through silent expectations, your very existence becomes an act of defiance. You won't need to shout. You won't need to argue. Your life itself becomes the statement. A statement that says, I will not shrink to fit your comfort. I will not betray my truth to protect your illusion. I will not wear the mask you've grown used to seeing. And for some, that will be too much. They will call you dangerous. But that's only because they've forgotten their own power. Because deep down, they remember they, too, were born for something greater than approval. But while they bury their fire to keep the peace, you've chosen to let yours burn. And when you live like that, on fire with truth, clear in your purpose, unshaken by noise, you begin to live differently. You stop reacting. You start responding. You stop explaining. You start embodying. You stop chasing. You start creating. And most of all, you stop waiting for someone else to crown you. You become the authority, not over others, but over yourself. That's the real revolution. That's the quiet rebellion. It's not loud. It's not public. It doesn't need a stage. It's in the way you carry yourself when no one's watching. In the choices you make when there's no applause. In the way you stand, tall, grounded, clear, when everything around you says, sit down, stay quiet, be nice. But you won't, because you remember what it cost to get here. You remember the nights you questioned everything. The moments you almost gave in, the pain of letting go, the ache of walking alone, the silence that stripped you bare. And you remember who emerged on the other side of all of that. Not a perfect person, but a real one who doesn't bend for love, one who doesn't flinch in the face of loss, one who doesn't need to be liked to feel worthy. That kind of person can't be broken, because they've already broken and rebuilt themselves piece by piece. With no blueprint, with no applause, with nothing but the fire of their own will. They don't need to prove anything. Their presence is the proof. And when the world tries to test them, with rejection, with ridicule, with resistance, they don't shrink. They don't fight for validation. They simply remain. Because real power is quiet. It doesn't beg to be seen. It doesn't need to be declared. It's felt. In the calm when others panic. In the stillness when others react. In the clarity that cuts through the noise like a blade of lightning. That's the kind of strength no one can give you, and no one can take away. But getting there costs everything that isn't real. You'll lose the layers you built for protection. You'll lose the voices in your head that were never yours to begin with. You'll lose the part of you that settled, that compromised, that feared being alone. And once those parts fall away, what remains is not just a stronger version of you, but a truer one. You'll speak less, but with more weight. You'll need less, but feel more full. You'll walk slower, but with unshakable direction. You won't move for attention. You'll move with intention. And when others try to define you, box you, label you, you'll smile, not out of arrogance, but because you finally understand. You are no longer living to be understood. You are living to be whole. You no longer fear being alone, because solitude taught you everything company never could. You no longer crave safety, because you've tasted freedom, and nothing else compares. And you no longer flinch when people call you too much, because you've realized they were always just too little. Too little to see what it took for you to rise. Too little to hold space for a spirit that refuses to bow. Too little to walk beside someone who no longer follows. But that's not your burden anymore. You didn't walk through fire just to go back into the crowd. You didn't shatter your old self just to be shaped by someone else's hands. You didn't come this far to only come this far. You came to become the kind of human who frightens systems built on silence, who disturbs rooms without saying a word, who carries truth like a flame and never lets it go out. Because while others traded authenticity for acceptance, you chose the path that gave you back yourself. And yes, that path was brutal. Yes, it cost you comfort, connection, the illusion of ease. But look at you now. You see clearly. You walk freely. You breathe deeply. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. And now you carry something most people will never hold. A mind that cannot be manipulated. A voice that cannot be silenced. A spirit that cannot be domesticated. That is rare. That is sacred. That is yours. So no, this journey is not for everyone. It's not for the faint-hearted, the people-pleasers, or the ones who still need permission. It's for the few, the rare few who dare to look in the mirror and not look away, who dare to rebuild from nothing, who dare to live awake in a world that sleeps. And now that you've made it here, there's only one thing left to do. Keep going, even when it's quiet, even when it's heavy, even when the world doesn't understand what you're becoming. Because you didn't choose this path to be liked. You chose it to be free. And freedom is the most frightening, the most powerful, the most beautiful thing you will ever hold. So hold it, even if your hands shake, even if your voice trembles, even if you must walk alone. Hold it, because once you do, you'll never go back, and neither will the world. Because once a mind like yours has awakened, it doesn't just change you, it changes everything you touch. So walk forward now, not as who you were, but as who you chose to become. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not alone. You are just ahead. And that is frightening, but it is also liberating.